Well, welcome to the Journey to the Stars monthly webinar with Stephanie Georgieff. This is a special Patreon benefit for the Journey to the Stars members, and I'm so pleased that you're here with me and very, very grateful to you for your continued support. This month, our monthly webinar will be on Mont Michel, the Knights Templar, and the Black Madonna. Now, this is a wonderful topic, and it's actually a topic that I gave a site at Mont Saint-Michel on the Normandy coast in France. It was just a wonderful experience to be at this amazing UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's really like stepping back in time and being in a fairy tale, to be perfectly honest with you, but it has profound implications for so many levels, but particularly our modern age and the fact that there's a wonderful Black Madonna that has been associated with this land, which has definitely been evolving in terms of who's involved with it, as well as the structures that have been placed on this island since megalithic times until modern times. I think the last major construction was basically in the late 1800s. So it's really, really beautiful. And we rented a house and had our talks there and then spent several days exploring the property. So if you can possibly go to this, definitely do it. And hopefully this webinar will be the next best thing. Now there'll be 4 talks in this webinar. The first talk, which is on this part of the webinar, is going to be esoteric geography, and it's very important to understand what that means in order to really understand the whole impulse of Mont Saint-Michel and the Knights Templar and the Black Madonna, very, very much interrelated. The next talk, which will be on a separate segment, will be all about the history and lore of Mont Saint-Michel. Very fascinating subject. I just enjoyed doing the research so much. And it's very, very impressive, interesting, and also pertinent for our current age. The following talk, the third talk, will be on the Knights Templar as emissaries of the age of consciousness soul. And for those of you who have been either reading my books or following me on various social media platforms, you know that one thing that sets me apart from other Black Madonna scholars and devotees is I relate the Black Madonnas with the Knights Templar. And it's very interesting to put those subjects together, particularly on this theme of Mont Saint-Michel. So we'll be talking about that in the third talk. And then the final talk is the Camino de Compostela as path of modern initiation. And some of you may know, and others may not, that this island, this fairy tale island, is actually part of the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, and it's part of the Camino journey. So we look at that as well as what it means in order to initiate the modern human. So it's a very, very interesting collection of subjects, and they actually intertwine. So I hope you enjoy, and just know that part of your benefit package is that you get a paper that I draw on to give the talks, as well as resources so you can delve further however your heart desires. Now, as the title says, the Knights Templar are part of this exploration in this month's webinar. And for those of you who don't know, this is a very interesting, I would say, misunderstood order of medieval knights that were also considered monks or priests. And they're very interesting because they came into existence in the early 1100s and lasted till 1307. And they took dual vows. They took priestly vows and knightly vows. And they're very interesting in that these warrior knights, warrior monks, were responsible for bringing Black Madonnas to the European continent from the Holy Land and some from Africa, and placed them all along the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. This is very, very interesting. And what's also interesting about them is their cultural impulse. Now, there's lots of mythology and legends. There's also a lot of very good historical documentation on the Knights Templar, but I tend to look more at the ideals of the Templars and their cultural initiatives. I think those are most relevant, particularly to the Black Madonna study. And part of my study, which you'll get in your resource directory, is I looked at not only exoteric history, but I also looked at the writings of Rudolf Steiner related to the Templars, as well as a series of lectures given by Manfred Schmidt-Brabant, and they were published in a wonderful volume of lectures on this. And so we learn a lot from them. But what is pertinent to our topic, which is I'm calling esoteric geography, is that we have been told by both Rudolf Steiner and Manfred Schmidt-Brabant that the Templars were great students of the heavenly earthly correspondence of the starry world. Now, one of the things that really sets the Templars apart, and it was actually to their benefit, is that they were aware of what they did not know. And this is a unique talent, and I think we all need to develop it, because it's very important for us to know the limits of our knowledge so that we can learn from others to expand our knowledge. And the Templars were very eager to learn from the many scholars, thinkers, and traditions that they encountered when they were in the Holy Land. And this is very true specifically for I would say their first probably 50, 60 years in the Holy Land. They were ardent students. And the contact that the Templars had with the Islamic scholars provided them with an approach to the art of astronomy that had not really been practiced in Europe for many, many years. Europe had great, scholars, and also the ancient traditions of the Druids and the Celts, et cetera, but those things kind of faded in what we call the Dark Ages. And in the 1100s, particularly when the Age of the Crusades came about, it just kind of opened up all of these fields of knowledge. So they learned a lot from that. And they also wanted to apply that to modern life. Now, this study affected how the Templars built their shrines and cathedrals and where they set up shop, particularly in northern Spain. Now, esoteric geography is the field of study that looks at the hidden meanings and spiritual implications and traditions of a geography. And Rudolf Steiner tells us that the universe has, in essence, imprinted itself onto the Earth. And this means that the fixed stars, the planets, and the galaxies have all left impressions on the Earth. Now, orthodox materialistic science tells us that the original cosmic bursting forth that produced our universe created the building blocks for all the members of the universe. Our sun came out of this event, and all of the original elements which make up life as we know it were present at this original occurrence. According to this theory, and I would say it's pretty factual, the Earth is the Goldilocks planet. And what this means is if Earth was 1 second sooner or later, or landed 1 inch closer or farther from the sun during this cosmic bursting forth, what we see around us as we live on Earth would not have been possible. And so that's pretty interesting. And what's also fascinating is that materialistic science, in essence, says that the Earth is what happens when stars cool down. So I always love that metaphor. Now, Steiner tells us that in the beginning, there was the sun, and there was a great separation that happened when Earth was created. And this was followed by a separation between the Earth and the moon. And again, this is Steiner's theories. I'm just giving you his theories. And when humanity was created, our original purpose was to become the 10th hierarchy. And we've heard of these different hierarchies of angels. They're called the 9 choirs of angels. And I never seem to get beyond the seraphim and the cherubim. I always forget what's in between them and the angels. But this is a very interesting I guess, dogma or description of the angelic hierarchies. But what is fascinating, and we often forget, is that humans were created to be the 10th hierarchy. And Earth evolution is part of a larger scheme in the universe where wisdom, cosmic wisdom, is supposed to be transformed into a cosmos of love. And through what we now call as the fall, humanity strayed from our original path by exerting our freedom. And the spiritual world realized that giving cosmic neophytes, such as humans, such power without proper training was actually not really fair. And so an elaborate plan B was developed, where through a series of evolutions and life cycles, humanity could collectively and individually in freedom develop different aspects of our bodies, such as our physical body, our etheric body, our astral body, etc., so that eventually we would be equipped and to meet and unify with divinity. And this is described in the book of Revelations as the meeting with the cosmic mystic lamb or the cosmic Christ. And so when we do this, we'll be able to go forward with our original plan membership in the 10th hierarchy and help to co-create the cosmos of love. And I just love this slide. This is actually courtesy of NASA, and it's a heart-shaped galaxy, and that's what it looks like, and that's the color it is. So I like that as a symbol that we're coming out of the cosmos of wisdom in order to co-create the cosmos of love. And our entire drama from Genesis through Revelation is the spiritual discussion of how we're going to do that. And in order to help our education and our development of freedom as humanity, the spiritual world needed to distance themselves from humanity. And Steiner talks about this evolution in terms of, he calls them the old mysteries, the semi-new mysteries, semi-old mysteries, then the semi-new mysteries, and then the new mysteries. And we're basically easing our way into the new mysteries. And in this whole progression of basically the education and evolution of humanity to prepare for this union with divinity, the living passive consciousness humanity had of the spiritual world had to be dimmed. But there were still points of location on the planet where the communication was still open, where the spirit world would convey messages to a select group of initiates, and they would give these messages about the mysteries of the age. And these locations where this mystery education happened were appropriately named mystery centers. And this is the famous one, Michael Skellig in Ireland. And this is a mystery center. And we'll see how interesting the placement of this mystery center is in the next few slides. But these mystery centers had locations that correlated with the starry realm as well as the planets. Now, after Christ's passion on Golgotha, the relationship between humanity and divinity changed. And now the age of passive receptivity of information from the spiritual world was altered to where humanity needed to exert more effort to gain wisdom. The mystery centers remain, and in Europe particularly, they have become the locations for shrines and churches, cathedrals, and more. And I also think these centers, these mystery centers, echo our memories of olden times, as well as our deep union with the sun. The Camino de Santiago de Compostela, loosely translated into English, means the path of St. James on the way of the stars. In ancient megalithic times, there were routes all over Europe that corresponded to the constellations. The northern traditional route of the Camino has the same pattern as the Milky Way. In ancient times, initiates traversed the star routes on Earth to gain wisdom and knowledge from the oracles in the mystery centers. There's a really interesting book. If you read German or you get a really good Google Translate on your iPad, it's very fascinating, and it's called his name is Hein Kaminsky, and his book, and I'll try the German word, it's Sternstraßen der Vorzeit von Stonehenge nach Atlantis, and it's the ancient star routes from Stonehenge to Atlantis. And this book was written in 1995, but his research is just absolutely meticulous. And he says there were 3 main routes traveled in ancient times in Europe. And this is the whole Camino. And we often think of the Camino only as several routes through France and then through northern Spain, but the Camino goes all over Europe. It just goes all over Europe. And the 3 main routes that are ancient star routes that we still see today, we still recognize them as Camino routes today, was the one in northern Spain, and you can see that on your left, and along Brittany and Normandy, and it's called the St. Michael's Way. And then there's one that goes through southern England. And these are ancient star routes that have basically been incorporated to modern pilgrim routes, but they're actually ancient pilgrim routes, but we've renamed them. And they're all aspects of the Camino de Compostela. Now, the location of mystery centers, which are now considered sacred sites, is not arbitrary. It's also thought that the placement of these mystery centers was chosen by humans. We know that energetic powers at these places, they've done really interesting scientific experiments where they look at, radioactivity and electrical activity, etc. And these places wax and wane, particularly between the seasons. and that there are astrological alignments of the temples in sight. And it's of note that some of the oldest and mathematically advanced structures from the megalithic cultures from 4000 to 1500 BC, these megalithic stone structures are situated at places with measurable geophysical abnormalities, which means there's magnetism, there's geothermal activity, specific mineral deposits, and underground water sources. It's been noted that the energies from these places fluctuate in radiant intensity according to the cycle and influence of different celestial bodies, and particularly the sun and the moon. But sometimes it's associated with planets. It's very interesting. These locations are mostly influenced by phases of the sun and moon, the solstices, equinox, and such, but also they're influenced by the stars. And the structures were designed to determine periods of increased potency at various sites. One of the most striking examples of this involves what is now called the Sword of St. Michael. It's a series of churches all dedicated to the Archangel Michael, which go from Ireland all the way to Palestine. And this map is a little bit fuzzy, but if you Google Sword of St. Michael, you can get a clearer one, but it's very interesting to me. And what is of note is the precise location of these churches follows the path of the sun on the summer solstice. I think that's very interesting. And the churches, and I'll try not to ruin these names, but it starts in Ireland, and it's Skellig Michael in Ireland. Then it goes to St. Michael's Mount in England. Then it goes to Mont Michel, which we'll be talking about at length. But it's interesting that on either side of the English Channel, there is a church dedicated to the Archangel Michael on either side. And they're very similar, actually. The one in England, it's in Cornwall, and it's also on an island. It looks very similar to Mont Saint-Michel. And then if we keep going down that sword, it's Sacra di San Michele in Italy. Then we have the sanctuary of Monte Sant'Angelo in Italy. And it's also interesting that the monks, when they were building the structure that we see now, which started very, like in the 800s, they went on a pilgrimage to the church in Italy, Sacra San Michele, in order to get relics to put at Mont Saint Michel. So there was an awareness of this. And then if we keep going south, we see Simis Monastery in Greece, and then we end up in Stella Maris Monastery, Mont Carmel in Israel. So it's just really fascinating. And in ancient times, this was considered the path of Apollo. And again, Apollo, the sun, and this is where we see the path of the sun on the summer solstice. There's also a very interesting alignment in England. It's called the path of St. Michael, and we see one of the churches and at Glastonbury. It's Mount St. Michael's Mont, and I've been there. And then that is the St. Michael Church, but this one that you see on the screen is actually in England. So it looks very similar to Mont Saint Michel. But if you see this map, it goes all the way down to the Michael Church, and then that's the path that has started in Ireland and then goes into France. Now, something really interesting that Rudolf Steiner tells us concerns the mystery traditions of the Iberian Peninsula. And we need to remember that the Iberian Peninsula was part of the Roman Empire at one time. And then there were lots of different principalities and mini kingdoms. And then there was the Arab incursions that started in the 8th century. And we'll talk a lot about that in other talks. But the Iberian Peninsula is the northern part of the peninsula is where the main Camino traverses. Now, if you want a interesting one that actually has more Black Madonnas on it, it's the coastal route, which you can see obviously is right on the coast, but then more inland, which is a little further down on the map in front of you, that's the main route. But this area, Rudolf Steiner tells us, this area was where the mystery traditions of the Jupiter mysteries were practiced. And the southern peninsula is where the Venus mysteries were practiced. And again, these are very ancient mystery traditions. But Steiner paints a very interesting picture of these traditions in a lecture cycle called Initiation Science, and I'll give you the reference for that. Now, Jupiter is the tradition which inhabited the land encompassing the traditional Camino route in northern Spain. Steiner tells us that in relation to other planets, Jupiter is the cosmic thinker. The spirits that inhabit Jupiter receive creative thoughts from the universe and reflect these thoughts in thought forms. Jupiter concerns itself with the present, but in a living way. Jupiter reveals its mystery to those who think for themselves and in a proper way, but the revelation or mysteries of Jupiter are only open to those who have a clear, active, light-filled thinking. Steiner says that if someone is trying to solve a problem when they get stuck and cannot find a resolution, if they sleep on it and somehow come up with a solution the next day, it really was the spirits of Jupiter that came to them in their sleep, providing insights and thoughts for the answer. The cycle of Jupiter is 12 years, which is a perfect rhythm for aiding human wisdom. The Saturn, if for those of you who follow astrology at all, sometimes you hear about the Saturn return, which happens between the 28th and 30th year. That's a long time, and sometimes it's hard to have a whole bunch of Saturn returns in your life, but every 12 years, if you have some reflection back, to the previous 12 years, you can actually gain a lot of experience. And for anybody that has walked along the Camino, even in our modern times, it's really a time of reflection, really looking back and doing a lot of thinking. I mean, yes, you really enjoy the absolute gorgeousness of the scenery, and it's also a difficult path. It takes a lot of initiative to walk that. But in ancient times and also medieval times, this was a path where people did a lot of reflection. So you can see that resonance of those Jupiter mysteries that are resonating even to this day. Now, Edward Shore, and he wrote this really interesting book called The Great Initiates, gives some insights on the Jupiter mysteries through his research on the Temple of Jupiter on Mont. I'm sure I'm not saying that properly. He relates the importance of the Orpheus saga, but also that Jupiter mysteries focus on the necessity of recognizing both the mother and father gods as they are both needed for creation. These mysteries of heaven and earth, the divine husband and wife, masculine and feminine, is reflected and needed for creation. Most interesting is the statement that apparently was said during the initiation process for those who were going through the Jupiter mystery initiations was, quote, "Look at the firmament, see the shining circle of constellations over which the filmy veil of the Milky Way is thrown. This is the body of the divine wife, who is revolving in celestial harmony to the songs of the husband. Now, I think that is so interesting because the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, particularly on northern Spain, that was the imprint of the Milky Way galaxy. So I think that's interesting. For me personally, I also find this aspect of the Jupiter mysteries as a deep reference to the dual vows of the Templars, that of monastic feminine and knightly masculine vows. Another little tidbit about the Templars is they fought with the Spanish kings during the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula, and one king, Alfonso the something, I can't ever remember the names because there was lots of little kingdoms there and everybody had an Alfonso and they had different numbers. But there was one Alfonso in particular that was very enamored with the Knights Templar, so much so that when he died, he had no heirs, but he had said, okay, well, if I die with no heirs, I'm going to leave my kingdom to the Templars, the kingdom of, half the Iberian Peninsula. Of course, his wife and his younger siblings weren't happy with this. So after lengthy court battles, the courts basically gave northern Spain to the Templars, particularly around the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, and the wife and the brother got the other parts. So it's very, very interesting. And I also think it's interesting because of the dual vows. Now, the Venus mysteries, and this is an interesting picture of Venus, and this is also a picture of the shrine of Montserrat. Steiner tells us that the southern aspect of the Iberian Peninsula, the tradition associated with this geography was the Venus mysteries. And the eastern path of the Camino, where Montserrat is located. Steiner tells us that the Venus, as the spiritual entity, is withdrawn from the universe. Venus actually rejects information and relations with the other planets as she feels it will sully her virginity. I just think that's cute. And then Venus is completely interested and focused on Earth and considers Earth as her lover. Venus carries out all secrets of the Earth's soul, and every human heart and soul is reflected in Venus. Venus carries all the secrets. Venus mirrors and transforms through dreams and brings light to everything that comes to her. Venus is recognized to be the great inspirer of poets, and her orbit of sphere is the dream state. Now, there's star correspondence all over the world, but the significant one for our discussion regards the Virgo constellation. And this is a Virgo constellation. And what's really interesting is if you plop the Virgo constellation onto France, you'll notice where the main stars, excuse me, all the main stars are associated with major cathedrals. And when I first learned of this, I just thought that was so interesting. But you'll notice, Chartres, Rome, Amiens, Evero, Bio, they're all related to different stars within the Virgo constellation. Excuse me. And all of these stars, these star correspondences with these great cathedrals, every single one of these cathedrals is called Our Lady. In Paris kind of diverges there, but it's close enough. Now, the one that I find the most interesting in the Virgo constellation is a star called Porrima. And in the center of the screen, you can see that's Parima. I'm sure you wouldn't know that it was anything else, but take my word for it. These are NASA photographs. That's the star Parima. And the star Parima in the Virgo constellation is the correspondence with Chartres Cathedral, Our Lady of Chartres. And there are 3 Black Madonnas in this cathedral. And Parima, the word Parima, is actually the goddess of head first birth. And in the corner there, you can see this really interesting thing that kind of looks like the Ark of the Covenant, but that's the relic of Chartres. And the relic is the birth shawl of the Virgin. Now, is this the real birth shawl? I can't guarantee that that's true, but I sure do like the symbolism. And it's, what's also interesting about Chartres is there are no dead people in Chartres. There's, even in the crypt, there's nobody buried in the crypt. There's no graveyard surrounding the church. And it's all about human knowledge. And the pilgrims used to go into the crypt in total darkness and sing and pray all night long. And then in the morning, they would come up into the cathedral, which is this magnificent celebration of light. And it was almost like being born. And so it's very interesting when you look at these different correlations between the heaven and the earth, particularly there. And the big take home of my talk is that we notice this ancient dictum, which really is associated more with Hermeticism, and it's the as above, so below. And we see this specifically when we look at the star roots and these churches throughout France, these great cathedrals, the correspondence. It's just so fascinating. And so we can see that there was a purpose to all the placements of the shrines, the Camino routes and the cathedrals. And it was this beautiful combination of a remnant of old clairvoyance, but a new conscious approach to spirit for a modern age. Now, Brabant tells us that the Templars wanted to take ancient knowledge and transfer it and Christianize it for a modern age. As students of the stars, and they were deeply reverent, as well as very high Christian initiates. I feel that all these correlations, specifically their task of putting Black Madonnas along the Camino, are very purposeful, especially when you consider what it means to have esoteric geography. So as we come to an end of this segment, which actually sets in motion the rest of the webinar on Mont Saint-Michel, I want you to know we have several more segments. And the next segment will be on the legend and lore of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And this is a beautiful picture of that. It's called Mont Saint-Michel. And again, I gave a series of talks there. And then the next segment will be regarding the relationship between the Knights Templar, the Archangel Michael, and the Black Madonna. And our final segment will be on the Camino de Santiago de Compostela as a path of modern initiation. And this is a beautiful, it's basically a 16th century map. I got a copy of it when I was there last summer. They had the coolest gift shop there, let me tell you. So if you would like to experience more of these webinars, and they'll be ranging in topics from Mary Magdalene to Byzantium and the Black Madonna, Wisdom of the South, early Christianity in Africa and Asia, the Divine Sophia, and art and architecture. and many more topics, please visit my Patreon page. It's the Black Madonna Speaks, and there's many ways to support my research, from $2 a month, where you get a special Black Madonna of the Month monograph. You can, at the $5 per month level, where you'll get a sneak peek chapter from one of my upcoming yet to be published books. So you'll basically get all the spoiler alerts for the upcoming books there. I also have a $10 a month where patrons get a special members only podcast on the Black Madonna of the Month. And these podcasts are not published to the public ever, so it's not like you get it before everyone else. You are the only one that gets it. And there's a $50 per month where you get all the other benefits along with the patron-only webinar that you can enjoy live or at your convenience, because they will be recorded. So please visit my Patreon page, The Black Madonna Speaks, for more information. And I want to thank you so much for your time. Stay tuned. We have more coming. And as always, blessings on your journey.